Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
It sounded like a simple enough job at first. Extract this kid from the slum. He was running his own little gang there, but his dad had come into some money and hired us to get him out at any and all cost. The pay was good, and we were in no position to be picky anyway. We were prepared for almost anything. Got a good look with some expensive overnight flyovers. Insertion by ship, then Zodiacs we sunk off the beach and anchored to the ground. We went in full squad, night camo and goggles, light silenced SMGs and a little heavy stuff should things get hairy, plus grenade options all around. We had an old Hind on standby on the boat, but we were afraid it would draw the entire city and left it for emergencies. The first 3 minutes went according to plan. We were up the beach and into the first line of huts made of garbage without detection. The stench was nauseating, as if the bodies we had just dropped had been dead for a month. Wilson slipped on what must have been a giant stream of feces and was cursing on comms. Next, we were supposed to cut down the road 2 blocks and secure an ambush to draw this kid's gang into. We figured as soon as we went gloves off, the people would react like any population would to a military unit in black armor shooting up their neighborhood at night. They'd run and hide. We were wrong. We got in 2 blocks all right. But the path was far from empty. Around the piles of shit and burning garbage, there were people everywhere. They just stared at us hustling down their street. No one ran. We shoved some aside and Taylor knocked one out who went for his rifle. That brought them out of their apathy. They started yelling, not at us, but to each other. The shout went out and within minutes the entire slum was upon us. We opened up on them as soon as they started to circle us in. I had not yet understood what was happening and thought they would turn and flee as soon as we put a few of them down, established dominance. But no, they kept on coming. There was no visible order to it. They weren't organized in any way. They just poured out of every alley and doorway faster than we could hold them off. My ammo was half expended, and the guys with the LMGs opened up. We went from silent death to full inferno, quickly established a perimeter on the intersection we were originally headed for, and put down deep fire arcs along the streets to 3 sides. The stream of targets wasn't slowing, and the first nades blew as everyone was starting to consider ammo reserves. It was just clubs and machetes coming at us, but there were so many. Taylor wasn't careful. Got too close to a window opening while providing cover down the street. All I remember is a flurry of arms exploding out of the dark hole in the wall, like a giant squid monster lying in waiting. They just dragged him through the wall while he emptied his magazine into their guts. It didn't seem to slow them. Good man Taylor pulled his pins before they had him finished, or maybe it was them. The whole hut went fireball as several frags and flashbangs detonated. I had shrapnel in my vest 20 yards away. At least we wouldn't have to worry about Taylor's arsenal being turned on us. I hoped. The Hind reported in, taking off to extract us, ETA in 8 minutes. It might as well have been a week. I scanned the structures for something defendable, but there was only plastic sheet, cardboard, driftwood, and quilted plastic bags. That's when I saw the first technical. An old pickup with an even older ZPU-4AA gun on the back slowly edged over a cross street, maybe 800 yards away. It accelerated away as soon as it spotted us, and I knew this was about to get much worse. The guys seemed to be of the same opinion, and after a quick exchange of glances, we started falling back through the structures behind us, knocking down doors and walls alike, killing everyone we encountered who didn't run away. Few did. We heard engines near where we had just departed, and shouts that sounded like orders. You know the sound in any language. Then all hell broke loose. A big automatic cannon, maybe the ZPU, opened up on the block of huts we had fled into, It just ate through the structures and everyone inside. The sound was that of an angry herd of elephants stampeding across behind us on the run from China's biggest chain of firecrackers. We abandoned all tactics and just ran through the walls as fast as we could manage. I could hear the hind flapping from the shore, still too far out. They must hear it too. Something hit my forehead. Did I run into something? I remember the ground coming closer and wondering if they had detonated an earth mover under us. But the thought was idle and distant. When I came to, everything hurt. My head was ringing. The daylight stabbed at my eyes. My throat was dry and full of dust. My left arm was throbbing. The stench of shit was overwhelming, and I raised myself onto hands and knees to throw up, realizing I lay in a toilet pit under rubble and corpses, all native. My gear might have been buried in the same hole as me, but I was too disgusted to find out. It took all my strength to ignore the flies on my face. After an hour or so, I could see more clearly. I heard nothing but normal voices, women and children. Someone was rummaging through the rubble further off. I considered waiting for nightfall but didn't think I could make it through the heat. So I dug myself out slowly and started through the now destroyed huts toward the Atlantic, not half a mile away. I got a lot of strange looks, but nobody challenged me. I was literally covered in drying shit head to toe. What remained of my gear was tattered rags and my boots. It took me an hour to get to the beach. I lost consciousness for a while between two old oil barrels and had to take it slow. But other than curious children, no one seemed to take note. Crossing the toilet beach seemed less repulsive and covered in excrement, and the ocean was pure bliss. I dove in and swam out a bit, washed myself as good as I could and rinsed my burning mouth and throat. I could just keep myself from drinking. I knew that the seawater would kill me in the state I was in. A little crowd had gathered on the beach, curiously inspecting my every move. I got a fix on my markers from last night and dove for the zodiacs, hoping that my people had gotten out by some other way. Hoping that they got out at all. I was in luck. I unhooked one of the inflatables from its anchor and took it up, just under the surface. I had to be quick about it, or my spectators would come out and grab me. Sure enough, as soon as I opened the inflation valve, they rushed into the waves towards me. I clamped down the motor and pushed the ignition. Good old American hardware came to life on the first try. A few rocks hit me and the Zodiac as we sped away out to sea, but I hardly noticed. I was just praying there wouldn't be an AK waiting for any stragglers around the beach. Took me all night to find our boat. I couldn't use the emergency beacon because I knew the warlords here had fishing boats in their employ. Too risky. But they waited at the alternate pickup. I was the only one to come back. None of my guys had made it out of there. Not even the hind had survived. It was a total clusterfuck. And we couldn't even deliver. No pay. It was the last job I ever did in my civilian life.
A little over 2 years ago, I was driving with my friend, my sister, and her boyfriend. We were on our way to get frozen custard after I'd picked up my sister and her boyfriend from school. My friend was in the passenger seat, and my sister and her boyfriend were in the back seat. We were stopped behind a car at a light, when my interest moved to another car across the street. It caught my attention because it was the same car and color of the car that I usually drive. At this time, I was not driving that car though. I had been driving my dad's car. I happened to notice that the car I was looking at across the street even had the same antenna ball head that my car did. I was so distracted by the antenna ball head that I hadn't even looked at the driver yet. Suddenly, my friend yelled, "What the fuck? That's you!" That's when my gaze snapped to the driver, and sure enough, it looked just like me. It was even wearing a shirt I own. At that point, the light had turned green and the other car and I had gone our separate ways. My friend and I were still freaking out, and my sister and her boyfriend didn't see it, so they didn't understand why we were tripping. Tears flooded my eyes because I was afraid that I was going to die, since I had already known information about doppelgangers. We continued and got our frozen custard. Within the next few months, I was a little paranoid, and I made sure I was the most cautious driver since I was afraid I was going to die. I often look back and think that my mind had over-exaggerated the events of that day, and that what I saw couldn't have looked that much like me. but I am always reassured because I was not the only one to witness it. I still can't get the image of what I saw out of my head. This was definitely one of the weirdest things that has ever happened to me.
I guess this is as good a place as any to get this off my chest. Bear with me, /x/. It's long, but I have to talk about this with someone. I can't talk about it with Amanda. This happened last summer, 2013, and I still haven't convinced myself it wasn't some bizarre, drunken fever dream. Some background info first. Amanda, my best friend, and I grew up in an out-of-the-way but booming neighborhood. When we were kids, new houses were constantly going up in the development. On weekends, we liked to go snooping in the unfinished houses. We outgrew it when we realized that skulking around construction sites did not make us badass explorers. It made us stupid kids. At some point after that realization, 3-4 years ago, some rich guy started construction on this huge house at the ass end of the neighborhood. The foundation and frames were finished, and about half of the walls were up when the investor put the project on hold. Everything was just kind of left where it was, like he planned to pick it back up any time. It was a huge eyesore, but the homeowners association didn't bother to raise a fuss since the driveway is about a quarter-mile long, and you can barely see it from the street. I'm not green-texting this, by the way. It's long enough without line breaks every 4 words. Fast forward to last summer, Amanda and I are 23, home from college for summer break. We haven't seen each other for months and want to do something together before we both head off again. Anon, we should go snooping. This sounded like more fun than several barrels of monkeys, just like when we were kids. We planned to camp out for the night in that house at the end of the street. We packed up sleeping bags, flashlights, and a few bottles of wine. This was going to be rad. It wasn't a long walk from our starting point, her parents' house, but it was still farther than we wanted to carry all our shit, so we took my car. It was kind of eerie even when we first got there, late evening. We live in a forested area, so most of the houses are surrounded by a little woods, but it's really thick around this place. You can't even see the main street from the bottom of the driveway. Long-ass driveway plus woods. A ton of construction equipment had been left behind too. Lumber, bricks, tools. It would be a death trap in the dark. There was a weird smell, too, coppery and a little, well, rotten. It wasn't very strong, and we stopped noticing it soon enough. We spent the remaining daylight exploring the place, figuring out what room was what, and wondering what kind of person would start such a huge project and then just drop it. We set up our little campsite in what we think was going to be the living room. It was a huge open space with an amazing view of the stars. It never got very dark. There was a big moon that night. We had a bright gas lantern, since it was too hot for a fire and we weren't dumb enough to start a campfire in a lumber pile. We were drinking, carrying on, and generally having a good time. I was sitting with my back to the outside and Amanda was facing me when she just froze mid-sentence, staring at something behind me. I twisted around in time to see something moving just beyond the tree line. It was gone too quickly for me to get a good look at it, but what I caught made my stomach flip. It was big and pale, and for some reason I thought it had too many legs. I stared for a little while, tense as a spring, but nothing else happened. When I turned back around, Amanda had gone white and looked like she had lockjaw. "You saw it?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. But I was coming down from the adrenaline spike and rationalized that it was probably just the neighbor's greyhound. Damn thing got loose all the time. We were tipsy anyway, we could have imagined it. Amanda nodded and relaxed a little. We went back to our fun times and had pretty much forgotten about it by the time we settled down to go to sleep. I woke up about 3 in the morning, desperately needing a piss. Amanda's sleeping bag was empty, so I figured she had gone to use the bathroom too. I took my flashlight, found a spot in what would have been the backyard, and did my business. Amanda was still nowhere to be seen when I got back. That struck me as weird, but I curled back up in my sleeping bag and didn't think much of it. I didn't fall asleep though, and after 10 minutes had passed, I got worried. She was either taking a while in the bathroom or she'd tripped and brained herself on that construction equipment. Just in case it was the latter, I got up and went to look for her. Since only half the walls were in place, it didn't take me long to verify that she wasn't in the yard area surrounding the house. I went back to the living room and started calling for her. not worried about making noise since we're too far away to disturb any of the neighbors. I kept telling myself she was just goofing off, trying to freak me out, and it was working. This isn't funny. Where the fuck are you? About that time, I got this creeping feeling that something was very, very wrong. I noticed that weird metallic smell again and thought it might have gotten stronger. I traded my flashlight for the gas lantern and started slowly searching the house. There were only so many hiding spots in that place. I was only searching for a few minutes, but in that time the smell got at least twice as strong and many times worse. It had undertones of vomit or rotting meat. Between the smell, my missing friend, and my nerves, I was losing it. I found Amanda at the opposite end of the house, in the room we had decided earlier must be a spare bedroom. She was facing away from me, looking outside. For a second I felt relieved. I had found my friend and she wasn't hurt, but something kept me from entering that room. I stood outside the unfinished door frame and just watched her for a bit. Her shoulders and back were shaking, only a little at first, but then violently, heaving like she was throwing up, but she didn't make a sound. The smell was practically burning my nostrils, and my animal instincts were going haywire. I couldn't just leave her though. I called out to her very softly. She started to turn. No, that's the wrong word. Her body didn't move or twist at all. She just rotated without actually moving, like she was on a spinning platform. That was when some switch flipped in my head and I booked it. My primal instinct screamed at me to run, 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 and that's exactly what I did. I don't know how I made it back to the car. I only remember thinking, that is not your friend, that is not your friend, that is not your friend. I practically threw myself into the driver's seat, locked everything I could, and was fumbling for the keys. I'd left them on the floor when we arrived. When I saw movement in the house, the thing that looked like Amanda was hauling ass through the construction site, headed right for the car. I froze in pure panic. It slammed itself against the passenger side door and tugged frantically at the handle for a few seconds, then looked me dead in the eye. "Quit fucking around, let me in." Something in me relaxed by about a micrometer. My primal fear was still going wild, but it wasn't over Amanda. Not now, at least. I unlocked the door. She half climbed, half collapsed into the passenger seat, then slammed and locked the door behind her. That was when I noticed her arms. They were bloody to the elbow, and she was holding them weird, like she was trying to cradle them against her chest without touching them to anything. I stupidly grabbed her wrist to get a better look. She whimpered in pain, but let me look. The wound. Jesus, the wound. It still makes me sick thinking about it. You know how carrots split when they dry out? That was what it made me think of. One on the top of each arm. She would have bled out in a minute if they had been on the underside of her arms. I didn't say anything, just went to crank the car, but something made me pause. The smell was back, stronger and more rancid than ever, and I heard heavy footsteps on the gravel outside. With the moon out, it was bright enough that we could see around the car, but there was nothing there. Everything was still. The footsteps continued, drawing closer until they stopped about a foot from my door. They started again, moving around the back of the car, up to the passenger door, and stopped again. Nothing happened for about 30 seconds. Then something big slammed into the door, rocking the whole car. We were too scared to scream. "Quit fucking around, let main." It was a voice, but at the same time nothing like a voice. You know how it's always kind of unsettling to hear a voice recording played backward? Because all of the rhythm, inflection, and cadence of the human voice is stripped out. That's what it was like. It didn't say anything else. It just kept circling the car. I don't know how long it lasted, Amanda and I sitting paralyzed in the car while that thing stalked around. I'm afraid there isn't much of a climax. The footsteps eventually stopped, and the smell faded away, but I couldn't tell you when. It was dawn when I finally made myself start the car. I took Amanda straight to the hospital. She started crying on the way, but we didn't say anything to each other. When the hospital staff asked us what happened, it was Amanda who answered and said she'd tripped and cut herself on the equipment at the construction site. The doctors stitched her up, and miraculously there wasn't any permanent damage to her arms at least. We've never talked about what happened that night. Whenever I try to bring it up or ask what happened, she clams up. If I know one thing about Amanda, it's that there's no way to make her do something she doesn't want to do. Someone actually finished that house. A chiropractor and his daughters live there now. My parents went to their housewarming party, but they couldn't get me to go for love or money.
When I was 11, my parents allowed me to stay in the house on my own. This took some getting used to, since we live in a 200-year-old place that creaks and moans every few minutes. Eventually, I got used to the eerie nature of the house itself, but something never felt right. You could feel eyes watching you from the ceiling, and I'd sometimes hear what sounded like a small axe tapping on the stone foundations in the basement. They echoed up through the air vents and would fade in and out once in a blue moon. Anyway, one day in January of 2007, a snowstorm sent me home after only a half day at school. I saw it as a chance to play some more RuneScape and spent most of the afternoon engrossed in the game. Just a half an hour or so before my mom was supposed to come home from work, I heard what sounded like erratic whistling coming from the basement. What I heard next will terrify me for the rest of my life. A voice that sounded like my mother's called my name, but it was off. Kind of as if it was on a VHS tape and had become degraded from decades of degradation. If there was anything else I remember, it was that it sounded as if my mom's voice was merged with that of a stereotypical Native American's, as the vowels and quirks had a long drawl to them. It called for me, whatever it was, and told me that it needed my help on a project. My mom takes carpentry as a hobby, and I loved being her apprentice. Somehow it must have watched us, and taken that knowledge into account when attempting to lure me down there. I almost ran down there on impulse, but eventually the strangeness of the situation registered into my head, and I bolted it. As I ran through the front door, I could hear heavy feet stumbling up the basement steps, and thought I saw what looked like an emaciated hand curl around the door frame when I looked over my shoulder. I fled to my next-door neighbor's house, and they eventually got in contact with my mom. When my mom found me at my neighbor's place, she asked me about everything that happened. Dismissing my claims, she called the police to inform them of what she assumed was a case of breaking and entering. When the cops found no signs of physical evidence of anyone being in the basement, she started to be more open to my fears. Several weeks later, she claimed that she had heard snarling noises and the movement of bare feet on concrete coming up from the air vents. Eventually, all it took was the basement door creaking open every night, and she believed me wholeheartedly. Her and my father contacted a local priest, and he blessed the house. Since that time, I haven't heard anything like what I heard on that cold winter afternoon. But every now and again I still hear the whispers of iron grating on granite, burbling through the basement halls.
It was Friday. I was sitting in my bed reading a novel late at night. I had the music playing on my laptop to create a relaxing atmosphere. I was engrossed in my reading, then all of a sudden, I heard a noise in the next room. I closed my book and I started to focus on the source of the noise. Silence. Because of the music from my computer, I couldn't hear very well, but I assumed it was a normal house creaking. I went back to my reading. A few minutes later, I heard the sound again, this time louder, as if someone were to take 2 quick steps in the adjacent room. I closed my book and I abruptly turned toward the door of my room, closed. I live alone. No one else than me is supposed to be in my house. I stopped the music from my computer immediately to concentrate on the ambient noise. Silence. I stayed in my bed for a good 5 minutes still. I heard only the silence of the house. Then I stood up. I laid my hand on the door handle, but I hesitated a moment. Am I ready to confront an intruder? I imagined some possible scenarios and I opened the door. I rushed into the kitchen, ready to fight. Silence. Nothing or no one was in the room. I glanced at the other rooms of the house and I checked that all the doors were locked. I looked at the clock in the kitchen. It was already past midnight. It was time for me to go to sleep. I concluded that the origin of the noise was due to my imagination and fatigue accumulated during the week. I turned off all the lights and then I laid on my bed, still a bit scared. I finally managed to relax thanks to the steady pace of the clock in the kitchen. Tock, tock. I guess it was just my imagination. Tock, tock, tap. Sound of footsteps. My eyes have opened on this noise. I was not dreaming. Someone or something was moving into the house and tried to drown out the noise over the tock of the clock. I began to believe in a supernatural event. I was assured just before I was home alone and that the doors were locked. I was paralyzed by fear. Tock, tock to tap. Completely still and silent, the noise seemed to get closer to the door of my room, always on the pace of the tock of the clock. The last step in front of my door, still paralyzed with terror, was too close to my taste. I was caught in a panic and I jumped out of my bed. My breathing was fast and my heart was beating too loudly. I could continue to hear the sounds of the stealthy footsteps in the other room. I put my hand on the handle of my door. Again, I imagined the possible scenarios before opening, this time including the possibility of crossing a paranormal entity. While I was turning the handle, I heard something here at breakneck speed, several fast steps, flipping what stood in its way. I walked into the kitchen and I opened all the lights. A chair had been knocked down and some papers had fallen on the ground. I searched everywhere for an explanation, but I was alone. I phoned a friend who, luckily, agreed that I would spend the night at her house that night, and I could sleep. Second night, I went to bed early in order to be on alert if something would happen before I fell asleep. I was starting to doze. Then I heard the tock of my clock. The memory of the noises of footsteps were associated with the clock, so I didn't want to hear it. I immediately got up and I removed the batteries of the clock. I went back to bed and the house was in total silence. Not a sound. Nothing happened that night as well as the subsequent nights. During the week, my friend came to visit me to catch up. We have agreed that I probably had a bad dream the other night. However, the presence reappeared that night after her visit. It was a perfectly silent night. I still haven't reinstalled the clock to avoid reproducing the sounds of talk that I was now afraid of. I fell asleep. I was awakened by surprise by a ringing phone. I immediately recognized my friend's phone ring. Ring. She must have forgotten her phone during her visit earlier. Ring. I got up and I turned the handle of my door. I realized that the handle offered resistance, as if someone was holding it on the other side. Then the door slammed violently on me, making me fall down. Ring. As I looked, the shadow of a man stood in front of me. The shadow was pitch black, pretty curved back, and surprisingly completely still. As I was about to get up, the phone rang one last time. Ring. The shadow reacted to the ringing and with phenomenal speed threw itself on me. Its cold hands clutching my shoulders, its movements were spasmodic and strange. His eyes were empty orbits. He had a smooth head without hair. Its mouth stretched enough so that a human head could enter. I was resigned to be devoured by this creature. I was not struggling, and I closed my eyelids. I was silently waiting for death. In fact, nothing happened for what I imagine were hours. I felt the creature grip slowly weakened. I dared not open my eyes for a while. I opened my eyes. All I've seen is the remains of the shadow dissipate in the dark. I was left alone in the silent darkness of the night.
This past November, first week of hunting season. My cousin and I go out early, about 5 a.m. when we get to our spots deep in the woods. Receive text from cousin a few hours later. Dude, there's some fucking guy pacing around down here. Figure it's another hunter. Tell him to call out so he doesn't get inadvertently shot or something. No, he's not another hunter. It's just some guy in a brown coat pacing back and forth with his hands behind him. Tell my cousin to tell him to fuck off. He doesn't know I'm here. I'm just gonna sit here until he leaves. Those are paraphrases of the texts, by the way. I don't remember exact quotes, obviously, but you get the gist. We continue to joke about it through texts until he tells me that the guy wandered off. At about 2 p.m., neither of us have seen shit. Decide to call it quits. We meet up and start walking out. As we're bullshitting and walking out, I see the guy up and off to my right. He starts walking really fast towards us, hopping over branches and shit while staring straight at us like he wants something. We both stop and he quickly walks up to us. Long brown frayed coat with a dark shirt underneath. Green ripped work pants with brown stains that I can only assume was dried deer blood or something. Muddy boots that looked too big on him, and a raggy knit cap like it was all thrown together with scavenged clothes or something. I assume he's homeless, but he looks to be in his early 30s and is relatively clean-shaven, minus a tiny bit of stubble. Hello! Hey, how are you? I'm good. Uncomfortable silence with him looking at us and smiling. So, do you need something? No, I'm fine. More silence. What are you guys doing? We were hunting, but didn't see anything, though. Oh, can you teach me to hunt? Well, you need a gun. You have 2 guns, I can use one of yours. At this point, we're thoroughly weirded out by this guy and his bizarre, almost rehearsed conversation, and I'm not about to give a gun to this loony. Maybe next time. We're leaving now. Oh, okay, I can show you guys out. So this guy either knows where we were parked or is trying to lure us somewhere. Screw that. Nah, we're fine. All right. We walk away and shoot each other that what the fuck look. About to start shit-talking that guy until we hear cracks behind us. We both look back and sure enough, he's following us. When he sees us look back, he just waves. We turn back around and decide to hurry up. Neither of us want to shoot this guy, but if he gets physical, we will. The entire way out, we're silent. This guy maintains a distance behind us. After what feels like an eternity, we see my cousin's truck on the little dirt road. We start speed walking to it, and we just throw our shit in the back and get in as soon as possible. Cousin asks if he's still there. I look out the window and see him just staring at us from like 100 feet in the woods. Cousin starts up his truck, and the guy just turns and walks off into the brush. We both start trying to figure out what was with that guy. Neither of us go back to those spots. He was probably mentally fucked or something, but what the fuck, man?
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.